She was born Isabel de Flores y del Oliva on April the 20th, 1586, in Lima, Peru, at a time when the New World was still raw, with uncertainty and spiritual hunger. Her father, Gaspar Flores, was a Spanish officer serving in the colonial administration. Her mother, Maria de Oliva, descended from a blend of Spanish and indigenous heritage. Even as a child, Isabel bore an unusual beauty, so striking that those around her began calling her Rosa, comparing her radiant face to the loveliness of a blooming rose. That name stayed with her forever, not just because of her appearance, but because of the fragrance of sanctity that would later surround her life. But Rosa was not a child of vanity. From her earliest years, she exhibited a remarkable sensitivity to the things of God. While other children played, she would withdraw in silence, drawn toward prayer and acts of penance. Her spiritual maturity seemed far beyond her years. While still young, she began to fast, spend long hours in solitude, and mortify her senses, not out of self-hatred, but out of an all-consuming love for Christ. Her heart was deeply drawn to the suffering Savior, and her soul hungered for union with Him through sacrifice. Recognizing this rare grace, the Church did not ignore her. When Rosa was of age to receive the sacrament of confirmation, she was blessed to receive it from none other than Archbishop Toribio de Mogrovejo, a holy man who would also later be canonized. In this act, two future saints met, one to confer the grace of the Spirit, the other to receive it with a fervor that would shape her whole destiny. Even in those early years, Rosa sensed that her life would not follow the usual path of marriage and social ambition expected of young women in her time. Instead, she began to orient her entire being toward God alone. And so began a life not of grand achievements or public acclaim, but of deep interiority, a life marked by quiet sacrifice, fierce love, and a longing to belong wholly to heaven. Her spiritual life was not merely devout, it was radical, consumed by an intense desire to imitate Christ crucified and to follow in the footsteps of those who had gone before her in the path of mystical union. Among the saints, she held a deep and tender devotion to the Blessed Virgin Mary, whom she called her Queen and Mother. But it was the life of Saint Catherine of Siena, a fellow Dominican tertiary and mystic, that lit a fire in Rosa's heart. Like Catherine, she longed not only to love God, but to suffer for Him, to offer her body, her beauty, and her comfort as a living sacrifice. She chose freely what most would flee from. She made a crown of iron, piercing it with 98 small spikes, and wore it hidden beneath her veil, to mimic the crown of thorns her Lord had borne. Her bed was not a place of rest, but of penance. 2 rough wooden planks laid across each other. She slept little, often spending the night in prayer inside a small hut she had built with her own hands in the corner of the family garden. That humble shelter, open to the wind and the silence of the night, became her cloister, the meeting place between her soul and her God. Rosa practiced severe fasting, abstaining from meat, sometimes for days, taking nothing but bitter herbs or bread and water. She disciplined herself with cords and scourges, not out of contempt for the body, but in imitation of Christ's passion and in reparation for the sins of the world. She never allowed her physical appearance to be a source of temptation or pride. When praised for her beauty, she would apply pepper to her cheeks to cause swelling or discomfort. She cut her long hair short, defying social norms and removing any vanity that might compete with her vow of purity. Even the floral garlands her mother lovingly placed on her head were, in Rosa's hands, transformed. she would quietly weave thorns into them, offering each sting as a silent act of love. Marriage proposals came, as expected, but Rosa turned them all away. Her heart already belonged to another. She had pledged herself to Christ alone and would not be moved by status, wealth, or worldly affection. In 1606, at the age of 20, she made her consecration formal by entering the Third Order of St. Dominic. Though she did not live in a convent, she embraced the spirit of religious life with total dedication. As a Dominican tertiary, she wore the habit, took on the rule of the order, and lived as a recluse within the world. A bride of Christ, hidden in the midst of daily life. In every gesture, every sacrifice, Rosa sought to be unnoticed by men, but known intimately by God. Her life was not one of public miracles or grand discourses. It was a life woven together in secret. Thorns beneath roses, silence beneath suffering, and a burning love beneath the humble veils of discipline and devotion. Though she lived in seclusion and embraced a hidden life, St. Rosa's love was never self-contained. Her solitude did not close her off from the world. Rather, it deepened her capacity to serve it. In the back of her family's home, she opened a small room where she tenderly cared for the sick, the poor, the abandoned, those no one else would welcome. Without formal medical training or resources, she provided what no earthly clinic could: compassion, dignity, and the quiet presence of someone who saw Christ in every suffering face. Her apostolate was not driven by noise or strategy, but by the silent power of prayer. Rosa spent hours each day in contemplation, her soul anchored in the mystery of God's mercy. She lived her days in mystical union with Jesus in the Eucharist, not merely attending Mass when possible, but entering into it spiritually with such intensity that she could imagine each word, each gesture of the liturgy, even when physically absent. Her inner life became a sanctuary in itself, where the tabernacle of Christ's presence was not limited to stone or gold, but etched into the very fabric of her being. Above all, Rosa's heart beat with a deep longing for the salvation of souls. She united her own physical sufferings, the hunger, the solitude, the pain, with the wounds of Christ crucified. She did not waste suffering. She transformed it. Every act of penance was an intercession. Every tear became a plea for mercy on behalf of those who had never known God's love. Though she never left Lima, her soul traveled far. She prayed fervently for the peoples of India and Africa, burning with a desire to bring the gospel to the ends of the earth. If her body could not go, her heart would. Her sanctity did not go unnoticed. After her death, the Church would recognize what heaven had already known, that this hidden woman of Lima had lived a life of heroic virtue. She would become the first canonized saint of the Americas, a flower blooming not in the courts of Europe, but from the rich soil of a continent still being evangelized. In doing so, she opened the path for holiness in the New World, proving that sanctity is not bound by geography, status, or acclaim, but flows wherever love and sacrifice meet in the heart of a soul consecrated to God. For 15 long years, Rosa walked through what the saints and mystics have called the dark night of the soul. It was not a darkness of sin, but of silence, a deep and painful sense of distance from the God she loved more than life itself. The warmth she had once felt in prayer seemed to vanish. The consolations of faith grew faint. Her soul felt abandoned, as though heaven had closed its gates. She was left with emptiness, dryness, and an interior exile that no one around her could see or understand. Yet Rosa did not turn away. She remained steadfast, clinging to God not through feelings, but through naked faith. In the silence of her suffering, she chose not to complain, not to question, but to surrender. Her humility deepened. Her obedience remained unwavering. She neither sought pity nor allowed her struggles to excuse her from love. To all who saw her, she appeared composed, even radiant, though within she bore a silent martyrdom. In this crucible of the Spirit, Rosa's sanctity was forged. She came to see suffering not as punishment, but as participation, a mysterious sharing in the cross of Christ. She once declared, "If men knew the value of grace, they would not complain of pain, but would seek it out, even embrace it, as the most precious treasure." For her, suffering was not an obstacle to holiness. It was the gateway. In one of her most astonishing prayers, she offered her soul entirely. "Lord, increase my sufferings, but only increase also my love." It was not masochism. It was love purified, a desire to be so closely united to Christ crucified that no pain would ever outweigh the sweetness of divine intimacy. She had discovered a truth that few dare to enter, that grace flows most abundantly through the wounds we accept in union with the Savior. And so, while her outward life remained hidden from the world, her interior life became a furnace, not of bitterness, but of consuming love. What she suffered in secret, God saw in fullness. Her perseverance in trial became one of the most powerful witnesses to the enduring presence of grace in a soul that chooses to trust, even when it cannot see. As her final years approached, Rosa's body, worn from a life of voluntary austerity, began to fail under the weight of illness. The pain she endured was severe, likely the result of an undiagnosed cancer, but she bore it with the same quiet dignity and unwavering trust that had marked her entire life. She was welcomed into the home of Don Gonzalo de Massa and his wife, a noble couple who offered her shelter and care as her health declined. In their household, surrounded by simple devotion and sincere affection, she spent her last months not seeking comfort, but offering her suffering as a final gift to the crucified Christ. Her physical agony grew intense in those final days, and yet not a word of complaint passed her lips. Instead, her prayer deepened, her gaze remained fixed on heaven, and her heart burned with longing. She was only 31 years old when she surrendered her soul to God on August 24, 1617. Word of her death spread quickly through Lima. Those who had once misunderstood her now wept. The people of the city, both rich and poor, flooded the streets to pay their respects. What had once been hidden was now honored. Her funeral became a public procession, a day not of mourning alone, but of sacred celebration. She was laid to rest in the chapel of the Dominican convent in Lima, the same religious family that had nourished her vocation. 2 years later, in 1619, her remains were solemnly transferred to the main church of the Dominican order, a sign of the growing veneration surrounding her memory. Miracles were soon reported through her intercession, and devotion to her spread not only across Peru, but throughout the Americas and beyond. The Church, discerning the fruit of her life, recognized in Rosa a model of heroic virtue and deep mystical union. In 1668, Pope Clement IX declared her blessed, and just 3 years later, Pope Clement X canonized her a saint, the first from the Americas to be officially raised to the altars. She was named patroness of Peru, of all Latin America, of the Philippines, of gardeners, and of Dominican tertiaries. Her life, lived in silence and sacrifice, now echoed across continents. Today, The Universal Church honors her memory each year on August 23rd, according to the general Roman calendar. In her native Peru and in several Latin American countries, the faithful still celebrate her feast on August 30th, preserving the original date that marked her passage from earthly suffering into eternal joy. Whether known as Rosa of Lima, the Rose of the New World, or simply St. Rosa, her legacy remains. A young woman who gave everything, beauty, comfort, youth, and pain, to love Christ without condition and to serve His people without praise. If this story moved you, if the quiet strength, deep faith, and radiant love of St. Rosa of Lima touched something in your soul, then I invite you to subscribe. There are many more lives like hers, hidden, holy, powerful in silence, each one a light in the darkness. Subscribe now, and let these stories of faith and courage continue to reach hearts that need them.